Happy Sabbath, everyone. Good morning, children. You guys are out there. I don't know.
Good morning, Sister Rachel.
Good morning. Good morning.
Rachel.
How are you guys doing?
Good.
That's good. That's good. So I hope you guys had awesome weeks. Is Zion there? I don't know. Well, let's speak if he's there. All right. So if you guys remember, last week we talked about God's covenant with Abraham. Throughout this whole story, we're just seeing God continuing to have his promise with Abraham, right? So he changed Abram's name to Abraham, which means father of many nations. He also changed Sarai's name too to Sarah, right? Because she's going to be the mother of all nations as well. And so God's covenant was about to come to pass. So we see here that, the covenant of Abraham having all of his descendants, how many nations would come from him, how he would continue to maintain this covenant with Abraham's descendants, and he would give Abraham's descendants the land of Canaan, which later you guys will find out is actually the promised land. So, in the covenant, the agreement was that God would give Abraham all of these things, and all Abraham had to do was be obedient and circumcise all the men in his camp. And a lot of people wonder, like, why circumcision? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One reason was it was a sign of obedience to God in all manners. Two, it was a sign of belonging to his covenant people. So once they were circumcised, they would be identified as God's chosen people. So like people would automatically know that they were chosen of God. Three, circumcision is a symbol of cutting off the old life of sin, purifying one's heart, and dedicating to God. And four, well, I don't really know about four, but it says like a health measure. That's a possible reason. So we're just going to hop right in. So the topics we're going to cover is Genesis chapter 8, which is where we see Abraham pleading or interceding over Sodom. So we're going to start at verse 1. This chapter is kind of lengthy, so just, bear with me. I'll try to get through it. So in verse 1, the Lord appeared again to Abraham near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. One day, Abraham was sitting at the entrance to his tent during the hottest part of the day. So it's probably noon. Verse 2, he looked up and noticed 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he ran to meet them and welcomed him, bowing low to the ground. My Lord, he said, if it pleases you, stop here for a while. Rest in the shade of this tree while water is brought to wash your feet. And once you've honored your servant with this visit, let me prepare food to refresh you before you continue on your journey. All right, they said, do as you have said. So here we see Abraham being eager to show hospitality to these 3 visitors. Like, why do you guys think he was so ready to serve these random strangers? Yeah, you guys don't know? It's fine. So in Abraham's custom, it was widely connected, like the type of person that you are, like your reputation in the town, like who you're known for, is connected to the hospitality, which is basically taking care of people in layman's terms. But the actual definition for hospitality is the friendly and generous reception of entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. So when you invite people into your home and you're friendly and you're warm and you're generous and you're happy to, take care of these people, whether it's feeding them, clothing them, anything, any way like that, that's hospitality. So in Abraham's day, people's reputations were largely connected to their hospitality or the sharing of home and food. Even strangers were to be treated as highly honored guests. So you see here, he's bowing low. He's offering to wash their feet. He's wanting to give them food and everything like that. And meeting another's need for food or shelter was and still is one of the most immediate and practical ways to obey God. So if you're wondering, like, how can I obey God? How can I bring honor to his name? This is one of the ways you can do it, by being hospitable to people. Because even in Hebrews 13 verse 2, we see that it reads, don't forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without even knowing it. And as we read further in the story, we're going to find out who these people actually are. So verse 6, so Abraham ran back to the tent and said to Sarah, hurry, get 3 large measures of your best flour, knead it into dough, and bake some bread. Verse 7, then Abraham ran out to the herd and chose a tender calf and gave it to his servant, who quickly prepared it. When the food was ready, Abraham took some yogurt and milk and roasted meat and served it to the men. As they ate, Abraham waited on them in the shade of the trees. Verse 9, where is Sarah, your wife? The visitor asked. She's inside the tent, Abraham replied. Then one of them said, I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah was listening to the conversation from the tent. Verse 11, Abraham and Sarah were both very old at this time, and Sarah was long past the age of childgiving. So she laughed silently to herself and said, how could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is also so old? So here we see Sarah laughing, right? Just as Abraham laughed when God told him he will have a son about, this time next year. Verse 13, then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, how can an old woman like me have a baby? Verse 14, is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Verse 15, Sarah was afraid, so she denied it, saying, I didn't laugh. But the Lord said, no, you did laugh. So here we see Sarah lying again, like Abraham did when they were in Egypt, and he was afraid that if Pharaoh knew they were together, he would be killed. So Sarah was afraid for whatever reason, so she denied it. So I didn't laugh, God, but she did, of course, laugh. But I want to go back to 14 a little bit. It says, is anything too hard for the Lord? The obvious answer is, of course not. This question reveals much about God. So I want to encourage everyone to make it a habit to insert your specific needs into this question. For example, is this day in my life too hard for the Lord? Is this habit that I'm trying to break from too hard for him to handle? Is the communication problem that I'm having too hard for him? Is my trust issues too hard for him? Asking these type of questions in this way reminds you that God is personally involved in your life, and it nudges you to ask for his power to help you, right? So is anything too hard for the Lord? Is it too hard for God to give me a child? Stuff like that. These are the type of questions that we have to ask ourselves and to God, so that we are reminded that he is a part, or he's incorporated in everything that we do, right? So as we go on, we're going to see how Abraham intercedes for Sodom. But I just want to touch on why Sarah lied a little bit more. Back to verse 15. Sarah lied because she was afraid of being discovered, right? Fear usually is the most common motive for lying. We are afraid that our inner thoughts and emotions will be exposed of our wrongdoings, or our wrongdoings discovered. But lying causes greater complications than telling the truth, and brings even more problems. So you're better off telling the truth in the beginning, because now Sarah looks kind of, doubtful of God, which she is. And, there's no point in lying, because God knows everything anyway. Verse 16. Then the men got up from their meal and looked toward Sodom. As they left, Abraham went with them to send them on their way. Should I hide my plan from Abraham? The Lord asks. For Abraham will certainly become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. Verse 19, I have singled him out so that he will direct his sons and their families to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. Then I will do for Abraham all that I have promised. So he's referring to the covenant that he made in the last chapter, in chapter 17. Verse 20, so the Lord told Abraham, I have heard a great outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah because their sin is so flagrant. I don't know why I didn't define this for you guys. My apologies, but I think I should have. It's okay. But flagrant means something considered wrong or moral, conspicuously or obviously offensive. So that just means something that is apparently. So their sin was so great, was so apparent, was so obvious that God heard the outcry of it, like coming up to heaven. Verse 21, I am going down to see if their actions are as wicked as I've heard. If not, I know what to do. 22, the other men turned and headed towards Sodom, but the Lord remained with Abraham. Abraham approached him and said, will you sweep away both the righteous and the wicked? Suppose you find 50 righteous people living there in the city. Will you sweep it away and not spare for their sakes? So why do you guys think, you can answer this, any guess, it's okay. Why do you guys think Abraham, asked God or tried to, plead with God, will he still sweep away the wicked with the righteous? Like, why do you think Abraham even dared to ask God that?
Why did Abraham ask? Just to make sure.
Okay, that's a good guess. To make sure that he wouldn't kill or not get rid of the righteous with the wicked. That's a good guess. Michaela, Kaylee, do you guys want to guess why Abraham even asked God about Sodom?
Because his nephew was there.
Yes, very good. His nephew Lot was there. So it's not that Abraham didn't care about all the other people that lived there, but he wanted to make sure that his nephew Lot was to be saved, because he knew he was a righteous man, well, for the most part, and he didn't want, his nephew getting caught up with those things with the other wicked sinners, right? Or the wicked people. So, yeah, let's continue on to verse 25. Surely you wouldn't, so this is Abraham speaking, surely you wouldn't do such a thing, destroying the righteous along with the wicked. Why, you would be treating the righteous and the wicked exactly the same. Surely you wouldn't do that. Should not the judge of all the earth do what's right? So here we see Abraham, in a way, not challenging God, but he's like, you're too righteous to be doing something like that. I don't think you would do that. So here he took this posture. You see how he's bowing his face low, because it's like, how dare you try to intercede on my plans? But Abraham came to him humbly, and the posture of his heart was pure. So he made sure he bowed down like this. Verse 26, the Lord replied, if I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the entire city for their sake. Then Abraham spoke again, since I have begun, let me speak further to my Lord, even though I am but dust and ashes. I suppose there are only 45 righteous people rather than 50. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? And the Lord said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 righteous people there. Then Abraham pressed his request further. Suppose there are only 40. And the Lord replied, I will not destroy it for the sake of 40. Verse 30, please don't be angry, my Lord. Abraham pleaded, let me speak. Suppose only 30 righteous people are found? And the Lord replied, I will not destroy it if I find 30. Then Abraham says, since I have dared to speak to the Lord, Let me continue. Suppose there's only 20. And the Lord replied, I will not destroy it if for the sake of 20. Finally, Abraham said, Lord, please don't be angry with me if I speak one more time. Suppose only 10 are found there. And the Lord replied, then I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. And verse 33 in the last, when the Lord had finished his conversation with Abraham, he went on his way, and Abraham returned to his tent. So I just want to talk about how Abraham pleaded with God, right? He kept going. Like, it's not like he asked one time and he left it alone. He kept pleading and begging and pleading with God so that God would spare the city. It's interesting because here we see that obviously God here was teaching Abraham something. God showed Abraham that asking for anything is allowed, but with the understanding that God's answers come from God's perspectives, right? God didn't give him the answer that, because like the answer of I won't spare them, I will spare them if there's this amount, but he gave the answer based off what God himself saw. You get me? So it's not that Abraham really changed anything from God's perspective, right? So sometimes our prayers, they're not always in harmony with, sometimes God's perspective or his answers aren't in harmony with our expectations. The only one who knows the whole story is God. And sometimes we're missing out on God's better answer to a prayer because we're only considering the answers we expect, right? So here we see that Abraham and God agreed on 10. If God found 10 righteous people in the city, then he'll spare it. But little does Abraham know that, well, I don't want to spoil the next chapter, but I just want to emphasize that God knew how many wicked people were in the city, but he allowed Abraham to ask and plead on their behalf anyway, because God is trying to show him that you can ask whatever you want of God, but make sure that you're okay with his answer, right? So that's basically what is being taught here. Don't allow your expectation of what God is going to tell you blur his sovereignty, because God is still sovereign. He's all knowing. He knows everything. So don't let what you want the answer to a question be like kind of override God's better answer, because he knows all. All right, so now it's time for Kahoot. So make sure you get your phones out. If you only you already know the drill. It's only 10 people allowed at a time. But if you're in a household, you can share. But I do want everyone to be able to participate, so I'm gonna put the code up shortly. All right, so we're gonna put it up. All right, so
Sister Rachel?
Yes, sir.
I had a question while you were asking, and I agree with Michaela about Lot.
Yes.
But do you think in the back of Abraham's mind there is a remembrance of the flood with Noah?
Can you elaborate, Bishop?
Meaning that he remembers how God saved Noah and his family through the flood. Like that story is engraved in his mind, because Abraham came from that lineage. So Abraham knows the nature and character of God, that God will not destroy the wicked with the righteous.
This is very true.
Just a thought.
Yeah. I think because Abraham knew that God must punish sin because he is a holy God, that's just how it works. But he also knew that God is merciful to sinners. Merciful to sinners. But God, it's kind of like he knew that God would be merciful enough to save Lot. right? Because that's just the way God is, And it's not like the people of Sodom didn't have, their fair warnings and everything like that, but they just, kept going with their wickedness, kind of like the people in Noah's days, actually. So God still wants to give people opportunities, but it's like if they're not willing to change, then there's not much that he can do. So, yeah, I don't know if that, helped at all, but yeah.
Yeah, it did. Thank you for that.
No problem. All right, so we got 4 people on. So far, so good. We still got room for 6, but I'm gonna give it 2 more minutes, and then we're just gonna go ahead and get started. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. If you want to participate, a little bit after, the Kahoot code will be at the bottom of the screen. So here we go. Abraham intercedes for Sodom. All right, first question. According to Genesis 18, verse 2, Abraham looked up and saw blank men standing nearby. So yeah, the Kahoot code is down here. Very good. 3 men. 3 men standing nearby. All right. True or false? Abraham treated the 3 visitors with hospitality. Very good. He did. All right. Still anyone's game. True or false? Abraham and Sarah were already very young, and Sarah wasn't past the age of childbearing. False. They were very old, and Sarah was definitely past the age of childbearing. All right. Why did Sarah laugh when the Lord said she would have a child? Very good. She was past the age of childbearing. She thought that was funny. All right. Fish coming on up. Sarah was blank, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. Very good. She was afraid. She didn't want to be discovered, so she lied. All right, true or false? According to Genesis 18, verse 23, then Abraham approached him and said, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Yes, this is true. That is what Abraham said. All right. Still anyone's game. How many righteous people did Abraham first try to negotiate with God about? Very good. 50 people. Very good. Very good. All right. How many righteous people did God and Abraham agree upon? Very good. 10 people. 10 people. I wonder why he didn't bring it down to 1. It's very interesting. A little bit. Maybe that's not fair. I don't know. Double the points. This is the last question. Why did Abraham intercede the way that he did? Very good. He wanted to save his nephew Lot. All right. Let's see who our winner is. And 3 is B-Love. B-Love. Okay, that's kind of cute. In second place is Vish. And in first place, we have Love. Congratulations. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And yeah, I really hope that you guys learned something, and I hope that it was encouraging. And yeah, I hope that you apply everything that you've learned and things of that sort. At this time, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the service back over to First Lady. Thank you for allowing me to teach. In Jesus' name.